All right, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I want to start by shortly introducing the FASresearch project team. My name is Lisa. You already just met Valerie. She's our Zoom guru today, in charge of the technical background. Also with us is Christian, who is our Chief Scientific Officer, and Gregor, whom some of you have also met through the interview phase. This is what we are planning to do today. We are starting with the presentation of results. As Valerie said, and for everybody who just joined, we are recording the presentation of results, not the Q&A, not the small group sessions. The Q&A is after the presentation of results. We have for 15 minutes, and we have the possibility here that you can ask your question in person. So that is great. Please do that. If you don't like it, you can also write your questions in the chat function, either directly to Valerie or to everyone. And then the participatory part begins. We have breakout rooms, small group sessions, where we want to give you the chance to meet your colleagues and to discuss the question how you can think of to make use of this research. Then we take that back to the plenary session, where we ask you to share the three big main points of discussion. And then we have the concluding remarks, of course. What brought us here today? I want to quickly reflect on, before I dive into the study results, recap on how we got where we are today. You already heard from Bruno what the motivations were from the side of Porticus. They approached us about a year ago, and they really wanted to get a deeper understanding of the structure and the self-organization in the field of interreligious dialogue. And we discussed with them that our goal is to really contribute to the field. And how did we want to do that? We want to offer an overview of organizations that work on IRD issues. We wanted to make visible their relations with each other. And we also wanted to provide a tool that helps you, that is interactive, that helps you see these relations and actually engage with them, which is why we put the study results on an interactive web page. I already sent you that in the invitation. Maybe some of you had a chance to look at it. So we gathered a lot of material over the course of the interviews, and we want to share with you the major learnings, the major takeaways, even though there is, of course, a lot more to say. Here is a little overview of the databases. We conducted 134 expert interviews with interviewees from 45 different countries. On the map on the left, you can see how many interviews and where we conducted them. And that took us a good 4 months. And then we went into the analysis phase, of course. What is our first insight? Our first insight relates to a question that we asked you guys during the interviews, namely, what is your intention for participating in interreligious dialogue? What goals are you pursuing with interreligious dialogue? And here you can see the list of answers that we gathered on the left. To the right, how often they have been mentioned by interviewees. And I want to point out that the answers are not mutually exclusive. So somebody can pursue the intention to build peace as well as pursuing the intention to fight prejudice, for instance. You already can tell from this list that the field of interreligious dialogue is very varied. So different people pursue different goals. Of course, there are different approaches as well. This is something that we felt was also reflected in the terminology. Many of you gave us critical feedback and said, why call it interreligious work? For us, it's more multi-faith or interfaith. Also, is it really about dialogue? Is it not rather about cooperation or action? So you can tell that the field is quite varied here. And I also highlighted the most often mentioned intentions, the top 3. Let me go through them with you. The most often mentioned intention is to build peace and foster peaceful coexistence. Almost half of our interviewees agree on this. Second in place is voted by 35.1% that IRD serves not to convince the other, but rather to deepen the comprehension among people of different faiths and among non-believers, with non-believers as well. So IRD really engages to find common ground, to increase religious literacy, ideally to live together in harmony. And thirdly, IRD aims to open up space where people can experience and appreciate pluralism and the reality of diverse identities. This is an intention that 21.6% can get behind. So although interviewees pursue very different goals and are not completely united in what the intentions are, I think you can tell that there is a tendency here. There is a shared understanding that IRD has something to do with peace, with getting along with each other, and with celebrating diversity. And I want to share with you this quote from one of our interviewees, which I find very remarkable. The person said, "I did not get into interreligious dialogue to solve political problems or to talk about peace, but I find myself in that world." So even those actors that are not in it from a problem-driven perspective, even those actors tell us that it has something to do with peace. I want to offer you a slightly different perspective on the same issue. I just showed you a simple list of items. I want to try and give it some structure. Before we started on this research, we discussed with Porticus what are the different types of dialogue in interreligious dialogue. And we found that they could be categorized as follows. There could be the category of practical dialogue, so a dialogue which is focused on taking action, on really tackling issues. Here the intentions again are to build peace, to fight hatred such as anti-Semitism or anti-Muslim sentiments or racism, or to simply tackle different societal challenges at hand. Then we have the relational dialogue, which is the dialogue in which participants really engage with each other, with their relations, try to think about how they can live in a neighborly and in an open spirit. And I already elaborated on the importance of improving the mutual understanding and promoting diversity. Then there could be the type of dialogue that is informational, the one that is really reserved for the experts, for the academics, in which they try to get a deeper understanding of beliefs, of theology, of the history of beliefs, and so forth. And finally, there is the experiential dialogue, which is about the experience, the religious experience, the way to search for God, the divine, the way to engage in spiritual traditions. And as you can see here, the overwhelming majority engages in or pursues intentions that are on the practical and relational side. If you count these together, it's a 87.2% of the intentions are on the practical and relational dialogue, which tells us that IRD is not so much about discussing or building experience and expert papers, but it's really about action. It is really about seeking change. So this would be our first insight. IRD is a means to another end. We said the majority of intentions pursued with IRD focuses on how religions can contribute to solving problems. Now I want to hand over to Gregor for the next insight.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lisa, for handing over. Our second insight is about cooperation. So as some of you may recall, we asked you where you see opportunities to cooperate. You can see the answers here in the next slide. The most mentioned opportunity was about focusing on actions and current topics. So it's quite related to what Lisa was saying. 27.9% of our interviewees believe that IRD cooperation works best when organizations become active around specific challenges and current issues. I would like to share a quote here with you. There's a need for more action, not just clustering. So it's not enough just to meet up, but it's important that the cooperation leads to an action that manifests in the world. Many times we heard that there is a need for sharing knowledge. So best practices, having cross-country exchanges, learn from each other's successes and failures. 19.8% believe that this is an important opportunity to cooperate. And the third most mentioned opportunity was to work with non-IRD organizations. So to look for cooperation with people outside of the IRD sphere. In this context, policymakers were mentioned, governments, but also educational institutions and social movements. So these are the top 3. I'm not going through all the list now, but yeah, clearly the focus on action current topic was the most mentioned opportunity. So we could say that topic-based cooperation is the order of the day, which is our second insight. The question is now, what are these topics? What are the current topics in IRD? We also asked this in our questionnaire. Yeah, and you can see here the top 5 according to the frequency that they were mentioned. So gender and LGBTQI was most mentioned hot topic. Issues around gender identity. We also have a quote on this here, saying that, yeah, you can't have global justice without gender equality. So the question of gender equality here also. Radicalization and violent extremism. So it was the second most mentioned hot topic. So debates around the question of how IRD can contribute to preventing the radicalization of believers and religiously motivated violence. Then ecology is the third most mentioned hot topic. Naturally, as we were and are still in a pandemic, a very hot topic was also COVID-19 and health issues. And last, human and minority rights. So discussions and actions on the repression of religious minorities and marginalized communities, such as indigenous communities. As our study was global, we thought it could be interesting to visualize the most important topics of each world region to see whether we could find similarities or differences. So you can see here we chose the 2 most mentioned topics and assigned it to the respective regions. Maybe you just want to have a short look on it. Maybe you can recognize some of the topics according to where you are based in. Probably you also do something quite different, but this is just to give an overview and show tendencies. Yeah, and I will hand over to Lisa again, who will elaborate now on the network of IRD.
So this and the following insights are really about the centerpiece of our study, which was the network. How did we get there? Some of you will recall that during the interviews, we asked you to recommend other organizations, to tell us who else is important out there. We did that by means of these 3 questions. Who do you regard as a key actor? Who is a newcomer? And what formal networks do you know of or are you part of? And through these questions, we were able to generate the data of 831 organizations that you can see here in our network, the global IRD network. So each one of these nodes is an organization. You can also see that there are lines or arcs between those nodes. They simply tell us to whom each organization is connected to by means of the questions that we asked you. You will also tell that the nodes have numbers on them and that they are different in size. This relates to the rank. The size and the rank refer to 2 measures that we use in network science. The first measure is the number of times an organization has been what we call nominated or recommended by an interviewee. And the second measure is what we call network centrality. And network centrality, in order to have network centrality, an organization must be able to combine 2 elements. First, the organization has to be well embedded in its own clique, in its own group. It has to have a feeling of belonging to someone and to be integrated. And equally important, the organization must be able to connect different sub-networks or sub-clusters. It must be able to broker between different organizations. So if you ask yourself, why is Religions for Peace on place 1 in this network map? It is simply because they have been mentioned and recommended most often by interviewees. They belong to their own community. Here, particularly bigger international networks like CAICID or URI, but they are also able to reach out to smaller organizations that might be more in the semi-periphery of this network. What else can we say about this network? It is a single peak network. So instead of having several different centers, you are able to see here that there is one single core in the middle of the network. And this core is also highly centralized. It means that few organizations dominate the center and they collect most of the nominations or the recommendations that people give us. So there are very large networks in the middle, Religions for Peace, United Religions Initiative, the King Abdullah Center, but there are also organizations with a strong regional reach, such as Adyan, which is on place 4, which is based in Lebanon, Coexiste in France, for instance, or the Faith and Belief Forum in the UK, who have a strong regional reach. So what you could say as a first quote on this network is, it is single peaked. It has few organizations that dominate the center, but that is not all, of course. The network also has several subclusters. Subclusters, which is what I have, where you see the little orange rectangles around. These subclusters are gatherings of particular strong relationships among organizations. These subclusters are stable and they are cohesive because they're made up of triadic relationships. So triangles are very important in network sciences because they mean that each organization in a triangle is connected to the other organization. You don't need an intermediary to get to the other one. You have a direct relation. If a tie is cut off, you don't lose connections to the other organization. You still have a strong relationship with one or the other, so both. So these subclusters that you see are from, can be characterized, of course. The organizations in our network overall are from 95 different countries around the whole globe. And these subclusters are also mainly defined by geographic proximity. So the different organizations in the subclusters know each other because they're located in the same country, region, or continent. On the top left, you can see our Latin American cluster. Then there is a Bosnian and Croatian peace building cluster in particular. We have a Kenyan cluster, a UK cluster, a French cluster, and then there is one exception, which is the cluster of European academics. So the only subcluster which transcends country borders and actually is brought together by means of being academics, by means of being experts. You will also be able to tell that these subclusters are connected to the center, right? So there is lines going from the subclusters to the center, either directly or indirectly, they are connected. So our third insight would be that this interreligious dialogue network has a strong core, but also several stable subclusters that are connected to it.
Yeah, besides the attempt of creating a global network of IRD, we also try to find organizations which are networks themselves. We also asked our interview partners, are there any formal networks that you are part of? You can see here in the next chart a list of organizations most nominated as networks. We heard a lot about specific networks, in particular Religions for Peace, URI, and KIZ. And many of our interviewees spoke very positively about them and recognized their importance. However, there were also critical voices about our top 3 organizations. Also would like to share just one quote with you. So they are formalized, recognizable, and easy to work with, but they're not the most effective ones on the ground. Yeah, that's about this particular statement concerned the top 3 of our list here. We can find older networks like Religions for Peace or the Parliament of World Religions, but there are also younger networks like Yemuna in France or Connecting Actions. So in this sense, there is quite a diversity between the formal networks regarding their age. This would also be the first part of our 4th insight. The field has many established as well as recent good quality networks. So there are older networks and younger networks, and they have a high quality. Many of them have a high quality. we asked our interview partners as well about the quality of the network. We can see this in our next slide. More than 50% believe that the network quality is high. 21.5, you can see, have a medium quality, so they have mixed feelings. 11.6% had mainly negative experience with the network and talked about the poor quality, and 15%, they could not really generalize it, but they rather started to talk about specific network instead of making general statements. But what does it mean now? So generally, I would say it's quite a positive picture. Yeah, more than two thirds of our interviewees somehow think that they are whether part of a high quality or medium quality network. But what does it mean now, the quality? What does it mean when they tell us the network has a high quality? And we try to find indicators what makes a high quality. So we found, according to the statements of our interview partners, 5 indicators that for the quality of a network. The first one is diversity of actors, then cooperation and exchange, meaning that the network is a space where members can share best practices, and simply cooperate with each other. Consistency was another indicator, meaning that the network doesn't crumble or vanish over time, but it is sustainable and lasting and allows its members to depend on each other. Impact was another indicator, so meaning that the network has a real life impact and touches upon people's lives. And strong relationships, so where people know and trust each other. Yeah, that's it about the quality of the network, and Lisa will continue with the 5th insight.
Thanks, Gregor. For this mapping, it was important to us that we don't just cover the big organizations that are already well established or well known, but that we also get those into the map that recently just maybe started or engaging in IRD. So one of the questions that we asked you was, who is a newcomer? Our perception during the interviews was that that was a particular hard question for some of you. Some could only think of 1 or maybe 2 organizations that they would regard as newcomers, as organizations that recently emerged on the scene. But we still managed to get 104 different organizations that people recognize as newcomers. They are here colored in orange. And what is remarkable here is that the newcomers in this network are not sidelined, right? They are visible in all layers of the network. Of course, some are in the periphery. There are many in the semi-periphery, and they also make their way into the center. So they're really spread across all layers of the network, and they're also very much appreciated and recognized in the center of the network. I can tell you a similar tale when it comes to women. When we asked you who else we should be talking to, you recommend most people nominated men rather than women. So in this chart, you can see that 2/3 of the person in our network is male and only 1/3 is female. Gregor just elaborated on the fact that gender is our hottest topic in this research. And we heard from many of you during the interviews that the issue of inclusion is very important and dear to actors in interreligious dialogue, and that the fact that IRD itself is often run by men is viewed as a problem, that women actually do play an important role, particularly on the ground, but that they are less recognized and not as often found in leading positions. So that paints a bit of a grim picture, but we have good news for you. Similar to the newcomers, you can see here that women are also spread across the network. So here in orange are all of those organizations that women were nominated for. It's 170 out of the 831. And although there are quantitatively less women in the network than men, the women are not on the margins, not at all. They can be found in all network areas. They are very present in the center. I believe that most of you will recognize that Religions for Peace, of course, is run by a woman currently. So women are spread throughout the periphery and the semi-periphery, and also have their way in the center, even though they are numerically less. And this is our last insight, namely that newcomers and women, though moderate in numbers, are well integrated into the field of interreligious dialogue. Let me sum this up for you. That was quite a long, quite a lot of information. First, we showed you what intentions people pursue with interreligious dialogue, and we found that the majority of these intentions pursued focus on how religions can contribute to solving problems and to changing relations. Second, we presented where cooperations are possible according to IRD actors, and that topic-based cooperation is the most often mentioned opportunity that you see. And this topic-based cooperation is well advised to take the issue of gender and LGBTQI seriously, the hottest of all topics according to you. Third, we introduced you into the network. We showed you that the network has a single strong core, but a core that is also connected to several stable subclusters. Fourth, when asked about formal networks in interreligious dialogue and their quality, we heard from the interviewees that they are by and large satisfied with the quality of these networks, and that we found recent as well as well-established networks among them. And fifth and finally, despite the fact that newcomers and women are moderate in absolute numbers, they play a very important role in all layers of the network and are well integrated into the field. So this would sum up our 5 insights and the presentation part of this webinar. If you want to know more, check out our website, of course. We have all of the insights on there, as well as 2 interactive maps, the interactive network map and our geo map that you can engage with. There is also an executive summary for download. I sent you the link in your email invitation, and we will of course send it again afterwards with the recording of this presentation on there.